ವೆಲ್ಕಮ್ ಟು ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿ ಜಮಖಂಡಿ. ಡಿಯರ್ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್, ನೀವು ಈಗ ಸದ್ಯ ಈ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಗೆ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದವರು ಪ್ಯೂ ಲೆಕ್ಚರ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಅಂತ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ನೆಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಸೆಟ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಎಚ್ ಎಸ್ ಟಿ ಆರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ನ ಲವ್ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವುದಾದ್ರೂ ಒಂದು ಡಿಗ್ರಿಗೆ ಓದ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಈ ಒಂದು ಸೆಷನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ನಿಮಗೆ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರನ್ನು ಜೊತೆ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿಯನ್ನು ಆ್ಯಡ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅದನೋ ಅಷ್ಟು ನಮ್ಮ ಟೀಮ್ ಹಾಗೂ ನಾನು ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡಿ ಈ ಒಂದು ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿಯನ್ನು ಪ್ರಾಪರಾಗಿ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿಕೊಂಡು ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಆ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರನ್ನು ನೀಟಂಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಕಲಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ. ಈ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಿರುತ್ತೆಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ದ ಒಂದು ಥಿಯರಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಅಂದರೆ ಟರ್ಮ್ಸು, ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ವರ್ಕ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಜನರ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ವಿಷಯಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಎದಕ್ಕೂ ಸೇಮ್ ಅಂತ ಕರೀತಾರೆ. ಒಂದು ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ದ ಲೈಫ್ ಹೆಂಗಿರಿದೆ, ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಂಗಿದೆ, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಂಗಿದೆ, ಇವೆಲ್ಲವನ್ನ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿಯನ್ನು ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತಪಡಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿ ಜಮಖಂಡಿ ಒಂದು ಹೊಸ ವಿನೂತನದ ವೇಯಿಂದ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದೆ ಈ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರನ್ನು ಪ್ರಸ್ತುತಪಡಿಸ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಬನ್ನಿ, ಇದು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತಂದರೆ ಇದನ್ನು ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲ ಫ್ರೆಂಡ್ಸ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದೇನಪ್ಪ ಅಂತಂದರೆ ನಿಮಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದು ಇಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಲೈಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಕಮೆಂಟ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಏನು ವಿಚಾರ ಅದ ಇದನ್ನು ನೋಡಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಟೈಪ್ ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡಿ. ಮತ್ತು ಈ ಒಂದು ಕ್ರಿಯೆಯನ್ನು ಅಥವಾ ಈ ಒಂದು ನಮ್ಮ ಈ ಸೆಷನನ್ನು ನೀವು ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ಫುಲ್ಲಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಯೂಸ್ ತೊಗೋಬೇಕಂತಂದರೆ ನೀವು ನೋಟ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಗಿ. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಇದನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿದಂಗೆ ನೋಟ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಹೋಗಿ. ಡೆಫಿನೆಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ನಿಮಗೆ ಇದರಿಂದ ತುಂಬ ಬೆನಿಫಿಟ್ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ ರೀ? ಸೊ ಯಾರು ಓದುವವರಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಯಾರಿಗೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ನ ಕಲಿಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಆಶಯ ಇದೆನೋ, ತಮ್ಮ ಉಜ್ವಲವಾದಂಥ ಭವಿಷ್ಯದಗೋಸ್ಕರ ನೆಟ್, ಸೆಟ್, ಪಿ ಯು ಲೆಕ್ಚರ್, ಈ ಥರ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಲಿಟ್ರೇಚರ್ ಬರುತ್ತೋ ಅಲ್ಲಿಗೆ, ಅವರಿಗೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಸೆಷನ್ ತುಂಬ ಬೆಸ್ಟ್ ಅನಿಸುತ್ತಂತ ನನ್ನ ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯ ಇದೆ. ಓಕೆ, ಸೊ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ವೆರಿ ಮಚ್. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ವಿಚಾರವನ್ನು ಕಮೆಂಟ್ ಸೆಕ್ಷನಲ್ಲಿ ಟೈಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಬನ್ನಿ, ಇವತ್ತು ಈ ಒಂದು ಸೆಷನನ್ನು ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡೋಣ.
Looks like a poster for a daily dose of literature series by Success Academy Jamkhandi, focusing on John Dryden. Are you interested in learning more about his works, or is there anything else I can help you with?
Yes, I want to know about him in detail.
Okay, John Dryden was a major figure in English literature, especially during the Restoration period. He was a poet, playwright, and literary critic who significantly influenced the development of English poetry and drama. Would you like to start with his life, his major works, or something else?
Yes, I want to know about his life.
John Dryden was born in 1631 in Northamptonshire, England. He came from a well-to-do family and received a good education, studying at Westminster School and Trinity College, Cambridge. His life and career were deeply influenced by the political and social changes of his time, especially the English Civil War and the restoration of the monarchy.
Now tell me about his basic education.
Dryden received a classical education, focusing on Latin and Greek literature. He attended Westminster School in London, where he developed a strong foundation in language and rhetoric. He then went on to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in 1654.
Now tell me, which are the key milestones in the author's life that influence his writing?
Dryden's life was full of changes, and each one shaped his writing. The English Civil War and the restoration of the monarchy were big events that influenced his views on politics and society. He also had a successful career as a playwright, which helped him develop his skills in storytelling and character development.
How did the author's historical and cultural context shape his worldview?
Dryden lived during a time of great change in England. The English Civil War and the restoration of the monarchy had a big impact on his views. He believed in order and stability, and this shows in his writing, where he often praises strong leadership and traditional values.
Were there any personal experiences that strongly influenced his literary style?
While not much is known about Dryden's personal life, his marriage to Lady Elizabeth Howard in 1663 was a significant event. It connected him to the powerful Howard family and likely influenced his social standing and career opportunities.
What are the author's most significant works and in what genres did they write?
Dryden was a versatile writer who excelled in various genres. He wrote plays like All for Love and The Indian Queen, poems like Absalom and Achitophel and Macflecknoe, and critical essays like An Essay of Dramatic Poesy. His works often reflected the political and social issues of his time, and he was known for his wit, satire, and mastery of the English language.
Can you explain the themes and styles found in his major works?
Dryden's major works often explore themes of power, politics, and morality. He used a variety of styles, including satire, heroic couplets, and dramatic verse, to convey his ideas. For example, Absalom and Achitophel is a political satire that uses biblical allegory to comment on the events of his time. All for Love is a tragedy written in blank verse that explores the complexities of love and duty.
Are there any lesser known but important texts students often overlook?
One of Dryden's lesser-known but still important works is Annus Mirabilis, a poem about the events of 1666, including the Great Fire of London and the Second Anglo-Dutch War. It's a great example of his ability to write about historical events in a compelling and engaging way.
What recurring themes or symbols appear across his works?
Dryden's works often feature themes of order, reason, and the importance of strong leadership. He also frequently uses classical allusions and biblical references to add depth and meaning to his writing. You'll find these elements in poems like Absalom and Achitophel, and plays like All for Love.
How does the author address topics like gender, class, colonialism?
Dryden's views on gender, class, and colonialism reflected the social norms of his time. He often portrayed women as virtuous but subordinate to men, and his works sometimes reinforced existing class hierarchies. His views on colonialism were complex and varied, but he generally supported England's expansion and influence.
How do these themes reflect the literary movement they belong to?
Dryden's themes and styles are closely tied to the Restoration period, a time when English literature was heavily influenced by classical ideals of order, reason, and decorum. His works often reflect the political and social concerns of this era, such as the importance of strong leadership and the dangers of political instability.
How was the author's work received during his lifetime?
Dryden was highly respected during his lifetime and was even appointed poet laureate in 1668. His plays were popular and his poems were admired for their wit and style. However, his political satires sometimes drew criticism, especially from those he targeted.
How has critical perception on his work evolved over time?
Over time, Dryden's reputation has had its ups and downs. In the 18th century, he was highly praised as a master of wit and satire. However, the Romantic poets of the 19th century criticized his focus on reason and order. In the 20th century, there was a renewed interest in his works, with critics appreciating his skill as a poet and playwright. Today, Dryden is recognized as a major figure in English literature, and his works are studied for their historical and literary significance.
What are some key critical texts or scholars I should know about?
If you're looking for critical texts on Dryden, John Dryden, The Critical Heritage, is a good place to start. For scholars, you could look into the work of David Hopkins and Stephen Zwicker, who have written extensively on Dryden's poetry and political context.
Okay, now I want to know about the literary movement and influences of John Dryden. Which literary movement or school is the author associated with John Dryden? Which literary movement or school is the author associated with John Dryden?
John Dryden is most closely associated with the neoclassical movement, which emphasized reason, order, and classical influences. His works often reflect the values and ideals of this literary period.
Who were his major influences and who were they influenced by?
Dryden was heavily influenced by classical writers like Virgil and Ovid, as well as English playwrights like Shakespeare and Ben Jonson. He, in turn, influenced later writers like Alexander Pope and Samuel Johnson, who admired his mastery of language and wit.
Did the author influence later writers or trends?
Absolutely. Dryden's influence can be seen in the works of later writers like Alexander Pope and Samuel Johnson, who admired his wit and mastery of language. His emphasis on reason, order, and classical forms also shaped the development of the neoclassical movement in English literature.
Can you describe his language, structure, and narrative techniques?
Dryden was a master of language, known for his wit, precision, and control. He favored the heroic couplet, a rhyming form that gave his poetry a sense of balance and order. In his plays, he used blank verse, a form of unrhymed poetry that allowed for a more natural and conversational tone.
How does the author use imagery or symbolism?
Dryden frequently used imagery and symbolism to convey complex ideas and themes. For example, in Absalom and Achitophel, he uses biblical allusions to create a satirical commentary on the political events of his time. He also uses imagery to evoke strong emotions and create vivid descriptions of characters and settings.
What makes his style distinct compared to contemporaries?
Dryden's style is quite distinct. He was a master of the heroic couplet, a form of rhyming poetry that gave his work a sense of balance and order. He was also known for his wit, satire, and ability to adapt his style to different genres, from plays to poems to critical essays.
Which texts are essential reading for net set exam preparation about John Dryden?
For the net/set exam, it's essential to focus on Dryden's major works like Absalom and Achitophel, Mac Flecknoe, and an essay of dramatic poesy. Understanding his role in the neoclassical movement and his contributions to literary criticism is also key.
Are there any important essays or letters by the author that give insight into his thinking?
Dryden's An Essay of Dramatic Poesy is a must-read. It's a key text for understanding his views on drama and literary criticism. His prefaces to his plays are also insightful, offering glimpses into his creative process and thoughts on various literary topics.
What kind of questions about this author are frequently asked in the UGC NET exam?
Okay, so for the UGC NET exam, you might see questions about Dryden's major works, his contributions to literary criticism, and his role in the neoclassical movement. You might also encounter questions that ask you to analyze passages from his works or compare his style to other writers of the time.
Are there any common misconceptions or trick questions to watch out for?
One common misconception is to think of Dryden as only a playwright. While his plays are important, his poetry and critical essays are equally significant. Also, be careful with questions that try to confuse his neoclassical views with romantic ideals, as they are quite different.
Can you suggest any memory aids or frameworks to study works effectively about John Dryden?
Sure, you could try creating a timeline of Dryden's life and major works, noting the key historical and literary events that influenced him. Mind maps can also be helpful to connect his works with the themes, styles, and historical context. Flashcards with key quotes and characters can aid memorization too.
Okay, now tell me the basic biographical details of John Dryden.
John Dryden was born in 1631 in Northamptonshire, England, and died in 1700. He was an English poet, playwright, and literary critic who significantly influenced the Restoration period. He was appointed poet laureate in 1668 and is best known for his satirical verse and heroic couplets.
Which genres did the author primarily write in, and what are the examples?
Dryden was a versatile writer who excelled in various genres. He wrote plays like All for Love and The Indian Queen, poems like Absalom and Achitophel and Mac Flecknoe, and critical essays like an essay of dramatic poesy. His works often reflected the political and social issues of his time, and he was known for his wit, satire, and mastery of the English language.
Are there any unfinished or posthumously published works of John Dryden?
Yes, Dryden's Fables Ancient and Modern was published posthumously in 1700. It's a collection of verse translations from authors like Homer, Ovid, Boccaccio, and Chaucer, and it's considered one of his most important works.
What recurring themes appear in the author's works? Example, identity, colonialism, or existentialism.
Dryden's works often explore themes of power, politics, and morality. He was deeply interested in the nature of good governance and the responsibilities of rulers. You'll also find themes of love, passion, and the conflict between reason and emotion in his plays and poems.
What literary techniques or stylistic features define his writing?
Dryden's writing is known for its wit, satire, and mastery of the heroic couplet. He also used a variety of dramatic techniques in his plays, like dramatic irony and soliloquies, to explore complex characters and themes. His critical essays are known for their clarity and insightful analysis of literary works.
How does the author's style evolve over time?
Dryden's style evolved over time, reflecting the changing literary tastes of the Restoration period. Early on, he experimented with different forms and styles, but he eventually settled on the heroic couplet as his preferred form of verse. His plays also evolved, moving from the elaborate and theatrical style of the early Restoration to a more restrained and classical style in his later works.
Are there any notable symbols or motifs they frequently use by John Dryden?
Dryden frequently used the heroic couplet in his poetry, a rhyming form that gave his verse a sense of balance and order. He also used satire to comment on the political and social issues of his time, and you'll often find classical allusions and biblical references in his works.
How were the author's work received during their lifetime?
Dryden was highly respected during his lifetime and was even appointed poet laureate in 1668. His plays were popular and his poems were admired for their wit and style. However, his political satire sometimes drew criticism, especially from those he targeted.
How does his writing compare with the contemporaries or predecessors?
Dryden's writing style was quite different from his contemporaries and predecessors. He was a master of the heroic couplet, a rhyming form that gave his poetry a sense of balance and order. He was also known for his wit, satire, and ability to adapt his style to different genres, from plays to poems to critical essays.
What major literary movements or schools are associated with John Dryden?
John Dryden is most closely associated with the neoclassical movement, which emphasized reason, order, and classical influences. His works often reflect the values and ideals of this literary period.
Which critic or theorists have written extensively about John Dryden?
Some notable critics and theorists who have written extensively about John Dryden include Samuel Johnson, T.S. Eliot, and more recently, scholars like David Hopkins and Stephen Zwicker. They've explored his poetry, plays, and critical works, often focusing on his role in the neoclassical movement.
How has his work influenced later writers or thinkers?
Dryden's influence on later writers is undeniable. He's considered a key figure in shaping the Augustan age of English literature, and his mastery of the heroic couplet influenced poets like Alexander Pope. His emphasis on reason and order also left a lasting mark on literary criticism.
How does the author's work reflect the socio-political context of his time?
Dryden's work is deeply rooted in the socio-political context of the Restoration period. His plays often explored themes of power, succession, and the role of the monarchy, while his poems satirized the political figures and events of his time. He was a keen observer of society, and his writing reflects the complex and often turbulent world in which he lived.
How does his writing compare and contemporaries or predecessors?
Dryden's writing style was quite different from his contemporaries and predecessors. He was a master of the heroic couplet, a rhyming form that gave his poetry a sense of balance and order. He was also known for his wit, satire, and ability to adapt his style to different genres, from plays to poems to critical essays.
What is his place in the canon of English literature?
Dryden is a giant in English literature. He is considered a key figure in shaping the Augustan age and is known for his mastery of the heroic couplet. His influence on later poets like Alexander Pope is undeniable.
Are there any cross-cultural or post-colonial interpretations of his work?
While Dryden lived before the era of widespread colonialism, some scholars have explored his works through a post-colonial lens, examining how his writings reflect the power dynamics and cultural encounters of his time. For example, his play The Indian Queen has been analyzed for its portrayal of indigenous peoples and its exploration of cultural exchange.
What are the frequently asked questions about his author in previous UGC NET papers?
Dryden's major works, like Absalom and Achitophel and an essay of dramatic poesy, often appear in UGC NET papers. Questions might ask you to identify key characters, analyze passages, or discuss his role in the neoclassical movement. His literary criticism is also frequently tested.
Which of his works are most cited in literary theory or criticism?
Dryden's An Essay of Dramatic Poesy is a cornerstone of literary criticism, often cited for its exploration of dramatic theory and its defense of English playwrights. His prefaces to his plays also offer valuable insights into his critical thinking and are frequently referenced in discussions of dramatic literature.
What are the key quotes or passages that often appear in exams regarding John Dryden?
Some of Dryden's most famous lines come from Absalom and Achitophel, like, "Beware the fury of a patient man," and "Great wits are sure to madness near allied." Passages from An Essay of Dramatic Poesy, particularly those discussing the nature of drama and poetry, are also frequently cited.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for giving the details about this John Dryden from the side of Success Academy Jamkhandi.
You're very welcome. I'm glad I could help. If you have any more questions about John Dryden or any other literary topics, feel free to ask.